Loneliness is not what's happening to you, it's what's being revealed in you. Right now, in this moment, while everyone around you seems connected, celebrated, surrounded, you're sitting in a silence that feels like exile. You scroll through pictures of gatherings you weren't invited to. You watch people build lives that look nothing like yours. You go to bed with a weight on your chest that has no name, only a feeling emptiness. And you've convinced yourself that something is wrong with you, that you're broken, that you're being punished, that if you were worth something, you wouldn't be here alone, staring at walls that know your secrets better than any person ever has. But what if I told you that this loneliness isn't your enemy? What if the very thing you're running from is the only thing that can save you? You see, most people spend their entire lives surrounded by noise. They collect friends like trophies. They fill every silence with conversation, every empty hour with distraction, every quiet moment with scrolling, watching, consuming, anything that keeps them from facing themselves, and they call that connection. They call that living. But it's not. It's hiding. It's a life built on the outside while the inside rots. And then one day, life strips it all away. The crowd leaves, the phone stops ringing, the invitations dry up. And suddenly, you're alone. Not because you failed, but because something inside you is ready to be born, and birth doesn't happen in a crowd. You feel rejected. You feel forgotten. You look at your life and wonder where everyone went. You remember when your calendar was full, when your name was on lists, when people needed you, wanted you, called you, and now, silence. You tell yourself it's because you're not enough, not interesting enough, not successful enough, not beautiful enough, not funny enough. You scroll through social media and see people living the life you thought you'd have by now, and the comparison eats you alive. You wonder what's wrong with you. Why them and not you? Why are they thriving while you're surviving? Why are they celebrated while you're forgotten? And in that pain, you do what everyone does, you try to fix it. You reach out to people who don't reach back. You force yourself into spaces where you don't belong just to avoid being alone. You say yes to invitations that drain you because anything feels better than another night by yourself. You perform, you pretend. You laugh at jokes that aren't funny and engage in conversations that bore your soul, all because the alternative, being alone, feels like death. But here's what you don't understand yet. That loneliness you're feeling is not punishment, it's preparation. It's not exile, it's education. You are in a classroom right now, and the curriculum is you. Everything you thought you knew about yourself was built on the opinions of others. Your confidence came from their applause. Your worth came from their validation. Your identity came from their acceptance. And God, life, the universe, whatever you want to call it, has removed the audience so you can finally meet yourself. Because you can't become who you're meant to be while you're still addicted to who people think you are. Let me say that again. You cannot step into your destiny while you're still performing for approval. You cannot discover your purpose while you're still chasing popularity. You cannot build an authentic life while you're still terrified of being alone with your thoughts. And so loneliness comes not as a curse, but as a gift. A brutal, agonizing, necessary gift. You're learning something in this season that crowds could never teach you. You're learning that you don't need an audience to have value. You're learning that silence doesn't mean abandonment. You're learning that being alone and being lonely are two different things. Being alone is a state. Being lonely is a story you tell yourself about that state. And right now, you are rewriting that story. Think about a lion cub. When it's young, it stays close to the pride. It plays. It eats what others hunt. It sleeps in the safety of numbers. But there comes a moment when the pride separates from that cub. Not because they hate it, not because it did something wrong, but because a lion that never learns to hunt alone will starve in the wild. The separation isn't rejection, it's activation. That cub has to go into the wilderness by itself, face its own fear, develop its own instincts, find its own roar. And in that isolation, something awakens. The cub that needed the pride becomes the lion that leads it. But that transformation doesn't happen in the comfort of the group. It happens in the terror of being alone. You are that lion right now. And you think you've been abandoned, but you've actually been released. Released from the safety that was keeping you small, released from the crowd that was drowning out your instincts, released from the noise that was preventing you from hearing your own voice. Because here's the truth, your roar was never meant for the pride. It was meant for your territory. And you can't claim territory while you're still looking over your shoulder for approval. This is what loneliness is doing in you. It's stripping away everything that isn't really you. Every false identity, every borrowed dream, every version of yourself you created to fit in. And I know it hurts. I know it feels like you're losing yourself. But you're not losing yourself, you're finding yourself. You're just losing the costume you wore to survive other people's expectations. Consider the seed. You plant it in soil, and what happens? It disappears. It goes into darkness. It's buried, covered, alone. If that seed could think, it would believe it was dying. It would feel the weight of the dirt pressing down. It would experience the isolation of being separated from light, from air, from everything familiar. But that's not death, that's germination. Everything the seed needs to become a tree is happening in that dark, lonely place. The shell breaks, the root pushes down, the shoot pushes up, and none of it happens in the crowd. None of it happens in the light. It all happens in the hidden place, in the isolated place, in the place where no one sees and no one celebrates and no one even knows you're transforming. Your loneliness is the soil, and you are the seed. What feels like burial is actually planting. What feels like darkness is actually the environment required for your breakthrough. You keep wanting to dig yourself up and prove to the world that you're still alive, still relevant, still worthy, but you can't rush germination. You can't force growth. You have to trust that something is happening beneath the surface that will eventually break through the ground. And here's what most people miss. The tree doesn't grow in the light. The tree grows in the dark. By the time you see it above ground, the real work is already done. The roots went deep when no one was watching. The strength was built in silence. The foundation was laid in isolation. And now it can withstand storms that would destroy anything with shallow roots. This is why your season of loneliness is not random. It's strategic. The version of you that's being prepared for your next level can't be built in public. It can't be built while you're distracted by other people's opinions. It can't be built while you're managing your image, curating your life, performing for crowds. It has to be built in the hidden place, in the alone place, in the place where it's just you and the truth. The potter doesn't shape clay in the marketplace. The potter shapes clay on the wheel in the workshop, away from the crowd. And the process isn't gentle. The clay gets thrown on the wheel. It spins. It's pressed. It's pulled. It's shaped under pressure. And if the clay could speak, it would scream. It would beg for the pressure to stop. It would want to jump off the wheel and return to being a shapeless lump, because at least that didn't hurt. But the potter knows something. The clay doesn't. Pressure isn't punishment. Pressure is purpose. The same hands that press are the hands that create. And what emerges from that wheel isn't what went on it. What emerges is a vessel, a masterpiece. Something that can hold weight, contain value, serve purpose. You're on the wheel right now. And the pressure you feel, the loneliness, the isolation, the weight of being unseen is the potter's hand shaping you into something that can carry what's coming. Because your next season isn't going to be light. Your next assignment isn't going to be easy. Your next level isn't for the fragile. And so you're being forged in fire. You're being shaped under pressure. You're being transformed in the one place where transformation actually happens alone with the Creator. Think about the eagle. When an eagle's chicks are old enough, the mother does something that looks cruel. She pushes them out of the nest. She doesn't ask if they're ready. She doesn't wait for their permission. She pushes, and those chicks fall. They tumble through the air, wings flapping desperately, terror coursing through their bodies. And if you saw it from the outside, you'd think the mother was destroying her children, but she's not. she's activating them. Because an eagle that never leaves the nest will never learn to fly. Comfort doesn't build wings, crisis does. And in that moment of falling, something clicks. The instinct awakens. The wings catch air. And what was falling becomes soaring. Your loneliness is the push. You're in free fall right now, wondering why life removed your safety net, and it feels like you're falling apart, but you're actually falling into who you were created to be. The wings were always there. The capacity was always there. The strength was always there. But it took the isolation, the separation, the terrifying moment of having no one to catch you for you to discover that you can fly. See, most people never discover their wings because they never leave the nest. They stay comfortable. They stay surrounded. They stay dependent on the crowd for identity, for validation, for worth. And they live their entire lives never knowing what they were capable of. But not you. You've been pushed. And right now, you're learning that you don't need the nest. You don't need the safety. You don't need the crowd. You have wings. You just needed the loneliness to force you to use them. This is what's happening in your isolation. You're not being forgotten, you're being refined. You're not being rejected, you're being redirected. You're not being punished, you're being prepared. And the preparation always looks like loss before it looks like gain. It always feels like death before it feels like resurrection. It always sounds like silence before it sounds like destiny. There was a young lion who lived on the edge of the savannah. He was part of a pride. And like every young lion, he learned by watching. He watched the elders hunt. He watched them patrol. He watched them roar at the border of their territory. And he felt safe. He felt protected. He felt like he belonged. But one day, without warning, the pride moved on. They didn't take him. They didn't explain. They just left. And for the first time in his life, he was alone. Completely alone. No roar to follow. No pack to hide behind. Just him and the wilderness. At first, he panicked. He called out, hoping they'd return. He waited at the spot where he'd last seen them, believing they'd come back. Days passed, then weeks, and slowly, the reality set in they weren't coming back. This was his new normal, alone, and he had a choice. He could die waiting for the pride to return, or he could become the lion he was created to be. So he started walking. And in that walking, something shifted. He stopped looking for tracks to follow and started making his own. He stopped waiting to eat and started hunting. He stopped listening for another lion's roar and started finding his own. And one day, standing on a cliff overlooking the valley, he released a roar that shook the ground. It wasn't the roar of the pride. It was his roar. The roar that had been sleeping inside him, waiting for isolation to wake it up. That's your story. You've been waiting for the pride to come back. You've been standing at the place where people left you, hoping they'll return, praying things will go back to normal. But they won't. And they shouldn't. Because normal wasn't your destiny, it was your prison. You were never supposed to follow someone else's roar. You were supposed to find your own. And the only way to find it was to lose the crowd. Let me tell you about the craftsman. He works in a small shop at the edge of town. No one sees him. No one celebrates him. He's not on social media. He's not building a brand. He's just a man with a hammer, a blade, and a fire. And every day he works. He heats the metal until it glows. He strikes it with precision. He folds it, heats it again, strikes it again. Over and over. The process is slow. The process is painful. The metal doesn't want to bend. It resists. It cracks. It protests. But the craftsman doesn't stop. Because he knows something the metal doesn't, this fire isn't meant to destroy. It's meant to transform. And after months of heating, hammering, folding, shaping, something emerges. A blade so sharp it can cut through bone. A weapon so strong it won't break under pressure. A masterpiece that will outlast the craftsman himself. You are that blade. And loneliness is the fire. The isolation is the hammer. The pressure is the forge. And right now, you're being shaped into something that will cut through every obstacle in your path. But you can't rush the process. You can't skip the fire. You can't avoid the hammer. Because strength isn't given, it's forged. And it's always forged in the place where no one is watching. There was a woman who spent her entire life in rooms full of people. She was invited everywhere, known by everyone. Her calendar was always full, her phone always buzzing, her presence always requested. And she thought that's what success looked like. She thought visibility meant value. She thought being wanted meant being worthy. But one day, everything changed. The invitation stopped. The calls stopped. The texts stopped. And she found herself alone in a way she'd never experienced. At first, she blamed herself. She replayed every conversation, every interaction, trying to figure out what she did wrong. She reached out to people who didn't reach back. She tried to force herself back into spaces that no longer had room for her, and the rejection crushed her. But then, one night, sitting in her apartment with nothing but silence, something clicked. She realized she didn't know who she was. She'd spent so many years being what other people needed that she'd never asked herself what she needed. She'd performed for so long that she didn't know what her real voice sounded like. She'd been so busy being seen that she'd never taken time to see herself. And in that moment of brutal honesty, she understood the loneliness wasn't taking something from her. It was giving something to her, herself, her real self. The one buried under layers of performance and pretense and people-pleasing. And she stopped running. She stopped trying to fill the silence with noise. She stopped looking for people to validate her. She sat in the loneliness and let it teach her. And slowly, over months, something happened. She started to like her own company. She started to hear her own thoughts. She started to discover dreams she'd buried, passions she'd ignored, a voice she'd silenced. And when she finally emerged from that season, she wasn't the same woman who entered it. She was stronger. She was clearer. She was whole. And the funny thing, the people who left during her season of isolation weren't part of her new season of elevation because she'd outgrown them. Not in arrogance, but in evolution. That's what loneliness does. It doesn't destroy you, it reveals you. It shows you who you are when no one's watching. It shows you what you believe when no one's validating. It shows you what you're made of when no one's cheering. Before I continue, answer one question honestly. When you're completely alone, with no distractions, no phone, no noise, no people, who do you become? Do you run from yourself? Do you numb yourself? Or do you finally meet yourself? If you're still listening, something inside you is waking up. Something that's been asleep for years is stirring. You feel it, don't you? That restlessness, that knowing, that sense that this season of loneliness isn't the end of your story, it's the beginning. You see, you don't grow in the spotlight. You grow in silence. You don't heal in the crowd. You heal in solitude. You don't find your voice in the noise. You find it in the quiet. Every giant you admire went through a wilderness. Every leader you respect went through isolation. Every person you look up to went through a season where they had to face themselves, fight their demons, and forge their identity without an audience. Moses spent 40 years in the desert before he led a nation. David spent years in caves before he wore a crown. Jesus spent 40 days in the wilderness before he started his ministry. And you in your wilderness right now, and it feels like exile, but it's actually education. It feels like punishment, but it's actually preparation. It feels like you're being buried, but you're actually being planted. Your loneliness is teaching you who you are, not who you were, not who people said you should be, but who you actually are. And that's the most important lesson you'll ever learn. Because once you know who you are, no one can tell you who you're not. Once you've sat with yourself in the silence and made peace with your own soul, you become unshakable. The opinions don't control you anymore. The rejection doesn't define you anymore. The loneliness doesn't scare you anymore. Because you've discovered something more valuable than any crowd could ever give you yourself. And now you stand at the edge of something. You feel it. This loneliness that once felt like a grave is starting to feel like a gateway. The silence that once screamed abandonment is starting to whisper revelation. You're different now. You can feel it in your bones. The person who entered this season of isolation is not the person who is about to exit it. Something has shifted. Something has broken open. Something that was dormant is now awake. You thought loneliness was the problem, but loneliness was the answer. It answered the question you were too afraid to ask, who am I when no one is looking? It answered the question you kept avoiding, what do I actually want, not what do people expect? It answered the question that terrified you, can I stand alone and still stand strong? And the answer, the one you fought so hard to avoid discovering, is yes, yes, you can. Yes, you are enough. Yes, you were built for this. Listen to me carefully. Your loneliness was never random. It was orchestrated, not by cruelty, but by design. The creator, the universe, the force that governs all things, it saw what you were becoming in the crowd and knew it wasn't who you were meant to be. It saw you shrinking to fit into spaces too small for your destiny. It saw you dimming your light so others wouldn't feel threatened. It saw you performing, pretending, playing a role that was killing your soul. And so it removed the audience, not to hurt you, but to save you. Because here's what you need to understand. Your assignment requires a version of you that the crowd would never let you become. The calling on your life is too big for the opinion of small minds. The purpose buried in your DNA is too powerful to be contained by people who are afraid of their own potential. You were never meant to live an ordinary life. You were never meant to blend in. You were never meant to be safe, comfortable, predictable. You were meant to be dangerous. Dangerous to mediocrity, dangerous to limitation, dangerous to every lie that says you're not enough. But you can't become dangerous while you're still desperate for approval. You can't walk in power while you're still walking on eggshells. You can't fulfill your purpose while you're still performing for people who don't even know their own. And so the loneliness came. It came to strip you, to break you, to rebuild you. And you're standing here right now, raw and real and more alive than you've been in years, because the loneliness finished its work. You're not the same. You don't talk the same. You don't think the same. You don't tolerate the same things. You don't settle for the same conversations. You don't chase the same people. You don't crave the same validation. Something in you has crystallized. Something in you has solidified. You know who you are now. And that knowing is the most powerful weapon you'll ever carry. The crowd is coming. I need you to hear that. The isolation was temporary, but the transformation is permanent. People are coming who will recognize the work that was done in you when you were alone. Opportunities are coming that you couldn't have handled before this season. Doors are opening that require the version of you that was forged in the fire of loneliness. But here's the warning: don't go back. Don't crawl back to the people who walked away. Don't return to the spaces that rejected you. Don't pick up the old identity you buried in the wilderness, because what's coming next isn't for the old you. It's for the you that emerged from the cocoon. You were a caterpillar crawling on the ground, and everyone was fine with that. They could relate to that. They could understand that. But you went into a chrysalis, you disappeared, you isolated, you transformed, and now you're a butterfly. And butterflies don't crawl, they fly. And here's what you need to know. Caterpillars will never understand your flight. They'll criticize it. They'll question it. They'll tell you to come back down to the ground where it's safe. But you can't, because once you've tasted the sky, the ground will never feel like home again. This is your moment. Not to prove anything to anyone. Not to show people what they missed. Not to make them regret walking away. This is your moment to step into the life you were always meant to live. The life that requires no explanation. The life that needs no validation. The life that exists because you finally decided that your peace is more valuable than their presence. You are not lonely anymore. Let me say that again. You are not lonely. You are alone. Yes, but there's a difference. Loneliness is a wound. Being alone is a weapon. Loneliness says, no one wants me. Being alone says, I don't need the crowd to know my worth. Loneliness begs for company. Being alone builds an empire in the silence. You've graduated from loneliness into solitude. And solitude is where kings are crowned, Queens are enthroned and destinies are activated. Giants are not born in groups. They're born in isolation. Leaders are not made in crowds. They're made in caves. Legends are not created in comfort. They're created in crisis. And you've been through the fire. You've walked through the valley. You've sat in the darkness. You've wrestled with yourself and won. And now you emerge, not as who you were, but as who you were always meant to be. The world needs you, not the version of you that fits in, not the version of you that plays small, not the version of you that seeks permission. The world needs the you that was refined in loneliness, the you that knows its worth, the you that doesn't flinch when the crowd walks away because you've learned to stand alone, the you that carries a roar that shakes foundations, the you that builds in silence and emerges with empires. Your loneliness taught you something the crowd never could. You are enough, not because of what you do, not because of who validates you, not because of how many people like you. You are enough because you exist. You are enough because you survived. You are enough because you're still here, still standing, still breathing, still believing that there's something more. And there is something more, so much more. Your story isn't over. It's just beginning. The chapters written in loneliness were the foundation. But the chapters being written now, they're the legacy, the testimony, the proof that isolation doesn't destroy, it develops. That silence doesn't kill, it cultivates. That being alone doesn't make you weak, it makes you unbreakable. So here's what you do next. You honor the loneliness, you thank it, you recognize that it wasn't your enemy, it was your teacher, and then you walk forward, not looking back, not waiting for permission, not needing applause. You walk into the rooms you were denied, the opportunities you were told you weren't ready for, the life you were told wasn't meant for you. And you walk with the confidence of someone who's been to hell and came back with fire in their eyes. You were not abandoned. You were appointed. You were not rejected. You were redirected. You were not forgotten. You were being formed. And the formation is complete. The lesson is learned. The season is shifting. And you are ready. Stay in your strength. Stay in your truth. Stay in the knowing that was birthed in your loneliness. Because the crowd will test you. They'll try to pull you back into performance. They'll want the old you, the safe you, the you that made them comfortable. But that version is dead. And you don't resurrect what God buried. You are who you are now. Powerful, purposeful, clear, awake. And the loneliness that broke you open was never meant to leave you broken. It was meant to leave you whole. If this message spoke to your heart, share it with someone who needs hope today. Someone sitting in their own loneliness, wondering if they'll ever feel whole again. And if you want more messages that grow your soul, that speak to the warrior inside you, that remind you who you really are, subscribe, because your journey has just begun. And the best chapters, they're still being written. You're standing at the edge of your breakthrough. And I need you to understand something with absolute clarity. This loneliness you've been walking through, it wasn't wasted time. It wasn't a detour. It wasn't God forgetting about you or the universe abandoning you. It was the most important season of your entire life, because in that isolation, you discovered something no crowd could ever give you yourself. The real you, not the performer, not the people pleaser, not the version that bends and breaks to fit into spaces too small for your calling. The real you, the powerful you, the you that doesn't need validation because you've validated yourself. The you that doesn't fear rejection because you've learned that rejection is often redirection towards something greater. And now you know. You know what you are made of. You know what you can survive. You know that you can sit in silence and not fall apart. You know that you can face yourself in the mirror and not run. You know that your worth isn't determined by who stays or who leaves, by who celebrates or who criticizes, by who sees you or who overlooks you. Your worth is inherent. It's built into your existence. And loneliness didn't diminish it, it revealed it. So as you step forward from this moment, carry this truth with you. You are not the same person you were when this season started. You've been refined. You've been reshaped. You've been rebuilt from the inside out. And the life waiting for you on the other side of this loneliness isn't the life you left behind. It's bigger, it's better, it's truer. Because now you're stepping into it as the authentic you, not the manufactured you. The people who belong in your next chapter will recognize you. They'll see the work that was done in you when no one was watching. They'll honor the strength that was forged in your isolation. They'll celebrate the voice that emerged from your silence. And the ones who don't recognize it, they weren't meant for this season. And that's okay, because you're not building a crowd anymore. You're building a legacy. Your loneliness taught you who you are. And now that you know, nothing can shake you. Not rejection, not abandonment, not silence, not isolation, because you've already been through the worst of it and you're still standing, you're still breathing, you're still believing, you're still here. And that means you're ready. Ready for what's next. Ready for what's been waiting. Ready for the life that requires the version of you that only loneliness could create. So walk forward. Walk boldly. Walk with the confidence of someone who's been to the wilderness and came back with wisdom, because your loneliness is over. Your lesson is learned. Your season is shifting. And the world is about to meet the real you, the unbreakable you, the unstoppable you, the you that was always there, just waiting for loneliness to reveal it. This is your time. Don't waste it looking back. Your destiny is straight ahead.